Tonight, someone finally calls out Superman on how BS the ending of Man of Steel was. StormWatch does a continuity reset on its own continuity reset, and someone should tell Aquaman that The Others is not a marketable name for a team. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 135 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and welcome to month 30 of the show. It's not actually month 30, it's like 32, 33 if you count 0 month and villains month, but I don't, so we're on month number 30. Anyway, we're going to roll right into this month with a little bit of a PSA, just a tiny little thing. About 2 weeks from now, I'm going on a week-long trip, and hopefully I should have everything pre-recorded, pre-edited, pre-exported, pre-uploaded. Everything should just seem totally normal to you. But there is a chance it might not get done because I have a very busy 2 weeks ahead of me before I need to leave. And this, unfortunately, as much of a priority it is one of the lower priorities. So I'm going to make sure everything else is done first, and then I'll try to get to this. But if it doesn't happen, I'm just letting you know, it hurts me a lot to miss a week. I haven't done that yet, and I'm hoping it still won't happen. But if it does, please go easy on me. Anyway, this week, we only have 11 comics to talk about. Very light week. Not quite as light as we're going to see next time, but in terms of like events and stuff like that, nothing's happening, and that is such a relief. We haven't had a week like this in probably 6 months. So, looking at the list of released comics here in no particular order, we have Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, Stormwatch, Phantom Stranger, and Swamp Thing. But I skipped over one in the middle there because we have a brand new number 1 as well. We have Aquaman and The Others number 1. For those of you who aren't aware, this has been hinted via an entire arc of Aquaman plus 2 other issues since then. So they've really been wanting to do this book, and they finally got around to it. So be sure to check that out. In terms of what isn't an event, we do have a prelude to Superman Doomed, then Action Comics, and Stormwatch, not an event, but it is the final issue of the series, and it goes out weird. I don't want to say more, but definitely check out the review to that, because it's weird what they do to end this series. Beyond that, everything else is pretty straightforward, nothing really of note there, but hey, check them out anyway, because I don't make this show for nobody. I mean, let's be honest, I make it for me, but I'm hoping you'll enjoy it too. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say, so I guess let's roll right on into whatever it is the first comic I want to do is. Aquaman and the Others, number 1, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Medina. So there were 2 issues of Aquaman prior to this that dealt with the others, setting them up, saying what their stuff is. They've all got magic Atlantean gold things, and it allows them to do powerful stuff. So we open up thousands of years ago with King Atlan himself. He's been banished from Atlantis. It was a whole story arc in Aquaman. And he shows up at this guy's place called the Alchemist, who's got a ton of, apparently, what's called the Gold of Legacy. And he's like, hey, give me your Gold of Legacy. And they're like, no, it's not allowed to any outsiders. And he's like, screw that, I have gone through enough. And he kills the Alchemist and takes all of his gold, saying that this will give him the power to reclaim his world and his legacy or whatever. So we cut to present day, New York. We meet with Prisoner of War, and his real name is Dominic Torres. He's able to see the ghosts of all of his fallen compatriots from when he fought in a war. And he's looking over a soup kitchen, and he sees a bunch of veterans there, and he's like, Jesus, America, you're broken if this is how you treat your veterans. And then he's talking to his ghost, saying like, yeah, at least they got to come back at all. And then all of a sudden, he's jumped by a bunch of people who were like, oh, he's highly trained and dangerous, fan out, everyone take him down. And so he gets into his man of war, or prisoner of war gear, and starts fighting against them. And then his whole thing is he can slam these manacles, they're golden manacles together, and it makes a huge like seismic force thing. But it doesn't do that. And he's like, what? Huh? So he just continues to fight them normally anyway. And then all of a sudden the helicopter shows up and they're like, all right, everyone bail. It's too much. We'll come back for him later. So they hop up there and he's like, all right, that was weird. Also, why aren't my manacles working? So then we go to Brazil and we meet up with Yawara, who in one of the most recent times we saw the others, she felt like she betrayed the group because of what happened. And she says, you'll never see me again. So we pick up with her in the Amazon. She's killed a... I guess animal trafficker would be the right way. Like poacher, maybe? I don't know. Regardless, they got some monkeys in cages. She's killed one of them, and they're just like, oh, you've killed one of our own. We're going to kill you now. And she's like, psh, pshaw, like you'll have the chance. So she starts fighting against them. And then she tries to do some teleporting in order to, like, get out of this, but her thing isn't working. She's unable to teleport. So she continues fighting. Her giant jaguar pet comes out and kills the last guy who was going to attack her. So she frees the monkey and she's like, well, I guess I'm stuck here for a while. Then we go to the Ghost Lands and we meet up with Sky Alcace, and she is the newest member of the group. She was a Native American who picked up a artifact that allowed her to see into the Ghost Lands, to walk into the like spirit realm pretty much. And she's walking there talking to one of her like elders who's just like, oh, well, you know, it's dangerous the path you're taking. And he's just like, whatever, I'm having fun with it. So she closes up the portal. She gets jumped by a bunch of guys. And they are, again, looking for the seal, which is her thing. And she just throws them into the spirit realm where they're all topsy-turvy and whatnot. She's like, no, I'm in control here. And I could leave you here to just rot over eons unless you answer all of my questions. And they're basically like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll tell you whatever we want. We just want the artifacts. All the others have them. And she's like, right, cool. Guess we got to get the team back together. And she opens up a portal and tosses them out. So then we go into the Mediterranean Sea where we meet up with the operative, who is Joshua Cole. He's an old dude who's still kicking ass as a super spy. And he bumps onto this boat where apparently there's a flash drive, which is important. So someone's named Cassidy is on the phone. I think it's his grandson, nephew, something like that, is on the comms and is just talking to him saying like, oh, you're late on the mission, old man. You got to pick up the pace. And he's like, shut up. So he goes through the ship, he finally gets to the safe, and he tries using his Atlantean key in order to get into the safe, but, like, it's not responding. It's not able to get him in. And he turns around and realizes that the stick he was looking for was actually hidden inside of a globe. And he's like, well, I guess I didn't need it anyway. So all of a sudden the boat just starts blowing up. The same guys come in. They're saying that they want the key. They get it. And then they immediately head out to the chopper, and at that point Aquaman pops up and he's like, whoa, what's going on here? So him and Operative start beating the crap out of these guys. They drop the key into the ocean and then bail. Aquaman goes down to grab it, and it's like, the key's not working and these guys wanted it like simultaneously. That's a bit weird. And Aquaman's like, all right, well, seems like we got to get the team back together. So we cut to a country called Trezigstan, where some ethereal voices are talking to this random dude saying like, oh, you failed. Every single one of those things that you sent out failed. And he's just like, oh, I will send more firepower. I will make it work. And they're like, you don't understand. This is war. And he's like, I don't see how it's a war, but all right, whatever. So he says he'll go and do it himself. And then the voices say like, oh, you don't understand just how all of this is going to shake out and how powerful the others are. And we see him enter a room that has rows upon rows of different types of like armor, like knight looking armor. And yeah, it's just leaving on a cliffhanger there. So we cut over to the living room, which is the name of the plane that the operative uses. And they've already got the whole team together. Everybody's just gathered up here. And Aquaman's like, all right, so something's going on with your stuff. My trident's still good. So my best guess here as to what's going on is that your things have become depowered because they've been away from Atlantis for too long. That's the running theory. That's what we're using here. And we see that Yawara and Aquaman are a little bit standoffish to each other because they had a thing. They apparently had some sort of romantic thing back in the past, and it's still coming up. But as they're talking about all this, the ship gets hit with some sort of missile or something like that. So that's happening. Something that also needs to bring up is that back during the other's first mission, the one who had the seal originally was killed, and we meet up with her family, who is from Iran, and apparently the sister-in-law of this woman, maybe just the sister, I'm not entirely sure, is now in like a mental hospital. And we see that the brother-in-law, hold on, so the death of his wife. So the wife of this dude was the one who originally had the seal, and then her sister was the one in the mental hospital. That's the relationship. Anyway, she's sitting there, she's screaming about like robots and destroying the world and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, no, we're just gonna go get her treated. That's the whole thing. And he's just like, okay, well, can I talk to her? And all of a sudden they hear explosions and screaming and whatnot. It sounds like it's coming from her room. So they bust their way in, and they see this woman being taken away by the same group, the same people who were taking away all of the artifacts, and she's screaming out like, hey, Hamid, who's this guy's name? Hamid, you gotta save me before it all comes true, before machines come to destroy us all. And in the reflection of her eye, we see what she was seeing. We see the Justice League all turned into robots, and they look evil. Future's End. Future's End, the new weekly miniseries coming out, I believe at the end of the month. Yeah, we're teasing that here. This is the first tease of that, and that baffles me as to why they would put that in this book, but alright, sure, why not? Overall, I mean, it's a fine enough first issue. It's weird because this trade comes with the previous 2 issues in it, where, like, what we dealt with the others beforehand, and it definitely, like, it feels like this is not something that is a first issue. It feels like you were expected to know the stuff beforehand. Yes, they went through a little bit of an intro, but not nearly as much as anyone who was reading Aquaman would have. So it's kind of hard to judge it just based off of its own thing of whether or not it works in an introductory sense. But I think it does a good job of at least setting up this story that it's going to tell moving forward here of, oh, all of these Atlantean objects are failing. I will say, it seems like the Trident should be failing. The reasoning they're coming up with for why it hasn't seems very much of like, well, he needs it in his book, so we're just not gonna talk about that. But regardless, it's a fine enough intro. I look forward. I have to have trust in Jan Jurgens to be able to tell at least an interesting story. So, yeah, I'll give this one I'll give it a flat 7 for now. It's still setting up expectations, but we'll see where we go. Detective Comics number 30, written by Brian Buccellato with Francis Manapul writing and on art. So we got a new creative team, new arc, and it's straight over from The Flash. So we open up at the Gotham harbor out on a dock, and we have 2 women who we're not familiar with just feeding some seagulls and saying all right, we've arrived in Gotham. It's a new start. It can be a great place for all of us. And we see then Batman is leaping through the city, seemingly heading towards something. So we go to the Chinatown section of Gotham City, and we see a bunch of people are talking about drugs. There's a drug called Icarus. And they're saying, hey, let's just hit some of that, go nuts a little bit, and we'll deal with everything afterwards. And we see that they also have some children who only speak Chinese. They're being held hostage here. Seems like it's some sort of human trafficking thing. And as they go and give the kids some food, Batman busts into the room and just immediately starts taking everybody out. And one of the guys manages to get out of the building as Batman's helping the kids. And as he is trying to get out, he gets all wrapped up in some lights, cable, something like that. So he's dangling above a building. And then this other gang comes up riding on motorcycles. He says his name is Holter. And Holder's like, hey, Johnny, why'd you steal from the kings of the sun? We're gonna take care of you, all right. So they cut down Johnny, and Batman's like, all right, kids, I'll get you back to your parents, but I gotta go deal with this. So they start riding away on their motorcycles. Batman's giving chase. Johnny's like, if you're just gonna kill me, I'd much rather go with Batman. And he's just like, yeah, no, that's not what's gonna happen. So they manage to get Batman puts up like a tripwire across the street. A bunch of the motorcycles get hit by it. Holter manages to cut through it with like a switchblade, which everything I know about Batman's gear says that should be impossible. But regardless, he does it. He throws it into Batman's shoulder. Batman's too busy taking care of another one of the bikers to go after them, and they manage to get away. So we cut over sometime later to Extreme Motocross at the Gotham Stadium, and we're introduced to the two women from the beginning. Their names are Elena Aguila and her daughter Annie Aguila. So Annie is the motocross expert. Elena is some sort of philanthropist, billionaire, you know the type. And Bruce is there as Bruce, and he's like, so, Elena, let's talk about that business stuff. And she's like, oh, hold on, I'm supporting my daughter in her motocross extreme stuff because she is like literally the best that there ever was at this. And Bruce tries to crack a joke because she keeps on eating these sweet candies, and she's like, oh, well, we've got the best dental team, you don't got to worry about that. And she's just like, oh god, please don't try to be funny. So she drives off, she does her whole routine, and Elena's like, sorry, yeah, she's, getting into teenage years, she's a little bit, you've got a son who's close to teenage years, right? And Bruce is like, oh god, my son. Anyway, what did you want to talk about here, Elena? Because this is, you've proposed this thing to Wayne Enterprises that's going to cost us millions of dollars. And she's like, billions, actually. So you're planning on demolishing the East Side and building it back up to make Gotham better, like you're saying. But I think it's so much better that instead we take the East Side, which is riddled with drugs and gangs and stuff, and we set up things like clinics and schools and things that allow them to benefit themselves, like rebuild the community from the ground up, And Bruce is like, all right, but like, what makes you think I'm going to say yes? And he's just like, because I listened to your speech that you gave in Zero Year right before the whole factory thing exploded, where you said Gotham has like a chance and we can build ourselves up. I know you believe in this, so you're totally going to go with it. Also, why else would you come to a dirty, grimy motocross expo if you were just going to say no? And he's just like, fair enough. All right, we've got a deal. So we see that the news has gotten a hold of this. There's a congressman who is shocked that Bruce Wayne is like going against his original plans here, and seems the congressman had some serious like pull in getting that going. So he's like, well, I don't know why Bruce has done this, but we're gonna see if we can convince him otherwise. And turns out the congressman is actually in the hands of another gangster who has a rose on his chest, and we're not given a name there, but he's given a suitcase and said, use what's in that suitcase to get Bruce Wayne to see the light. So then we cut back down to the waterfront on the east side, and we meet another gangster, seemingly from Kings of the Sun. They've got Johnny all tied up, along with the other guy, because turns out the other guy is brothers with a gangster named the Squid. And they didn't explain why he's named the Squid, but because the brother's not going to be punished for stealing from Kings of the Sun, this guy is. And so they lift him up and they drop him into a water tank that is seemingly filled with a giant killer squid. So that happened. Back at the Batcave, Alfred's like, oh, you see, conversation seemed to go well with Miss Elena. It seems like you guys were getting off on a good step there. And he's just like, yeah, totally, Alfred. And Alfred sees that he's fixing up Robin's bike and adding some extra features, and Bruce is like, I told him I'd add these features because like he was always asking for them, and I kept trying to like tell him that he can add them, but he just didn't do it. Now I'm doing this for my dead son, and he's just like, oh, you were a great father, sir. You don't need to do this. It's perfectly fine. And all this time, we're intercut with Elena, whose eyes are just glowing red. Her mouth is like spitting out smoke. And we hear a intruder alarm up through the Batcave. Bruce goes upstairs to see what it is. And he is greeted with Elena, who is just burning to a crisp in his arms. And that's where we leave off. So For anybody who remembers The Flash, back when Manapul and Buccellato were both on that, there was a 0 Year tie-in where they went to Gotham and there was a drug who did exactly the same stuff. So it seems like that was set up where now, however long 0 Year was, 6 years, I guess, ago, now we're finally getting the payoff on that where we're saying, okay, this drug is back and these guys have a whole thing they want to do with it. So I mean, good on them bringing back a thing that they set up in a totally different book and making it tie in here. That's a really great use of a shared universe. Yeah, I mean, I'm set for it. I really like this creative team when they were on Flash. I think they could do some cool things with Batman. I don't know specifically the direction this is going to take. Obviously, there will be some larger themes. Obviously, when they were on Flash, the larger themes were like, keep moving forward and keep on trying to build better on yourself. I'm not sure what they're going with here for Batman yet, but it'll become apparent over time. So, all in all, solid first issue. I will give it I'm going to give it a 7.5. It's very close to the 8, but I'm going to just take a little bit off there because of the multiple new like gang members and stuff like that are being set up. I don't think they did as good as they could have, like clarifying who belongs to where and making it obvious for a reader of like these different factions. Maybe it's supposed to be in the dark, but I left those scenes feeling a bit more confused than understanding exactly what was going on. So yeah, we'll see what goes on with all that, but for now, 7.5. Batwing number 30, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Eduardo Pansica. So last issue, Batwing's looking for his younger sister, like his younger sister, Tamara, I think. And he went to the Gotham Underground, got jumped by a bunch of people wearing Anubis masks, and then fell into some water where a giant prehistoric fish is going to eat him. So we pick up with exactly that and the explanation that I just said there. Turns out this was established earlier, he knows that it is his friend that he thought died named Russell Tavaroff. And he's like, I got to figure out what's up with that. I got to save my sister, so screw this fish. And he kicks the fish in the face, and he's so pissed off about it, as the fish comes around for his second pass, he just throws a small explosive into the fish's mouth, and it blows up. And he's like, I should feel bad, but I don't. So he climbs back up to the surface. Different area, no one's around, so he just walks around a little bit, and he's like, oh, wait, sorry. The youngest sister's named Tiffany. The older sister, who's currently comatose, is named Tamara. So, looking around for Tiffany. And as he gets up to the top of this ladder, he sees a sweatshop, and they're all being run by what we later find out are called speaker heads, because they all have speakers on their mask that like shout out orders and stuff to them. And he goes into invisible mode, just looking around, seeing what's up. And eventually one of the guys in this crowded room picks up a metal pipe and attacks one of the speaker heads. And Batwing's like, oh, all right, it's like an enslavement thing. All right, whatever. So they all start attacking the speakerheads, but then the speakerheads have an ultrasonic blast that they use to contain these people. And Batwing's like, well, that doesn't seem fair. So he busts in, and while still in invisible mode, he starts kicking all the speakerheads' butts, eventually hitting the power switch on the whole sweatshop. And he comes out of invisible mode, and he's like, hey, everybody, nobody move, I've got questions. And everyone's like, hooray to the great savior who came in and defeated all those things. Who are you? And he's like, Batwing, again, I just have some questions. And he's like, oh, well, my name's Samael. And they basically just start talking. They explain the whole speakerhead thing and whatnot. And he's like, okay, yeah, but like we gotta go because there's more speakerheads that'll come, and like even you won't be able to deal with them. So let's get out of here. And he's like, whoa, hold on. And he pulls out a little hologram of Tiff, and he's like, have you seen this girl? And he's like, no, but I think I might know somebody who might know something. So we got to get up above. So then we go to the Bat Bunker, which I think it's in Wayne Tower, maybe, because Lucius comes in and he just starts ranting at Batman. He's like, why haven't you found my daughter yet? And he's like, I'm trying. We're using literally every cop and every resource I have. And he's like, that's not good enough. We have billions of dollars and you can't find my daughter with that? What the hell, Batman? And he's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm doing everything I can. And he's like, well, it ain't enough. So he storms out. Batman goes to the computer and he's like, Batwing, where in the hell are you, man? So back down in the underground, Batwing's cracking jokes about like, so do I need like bottle caps in order to barter for stuff here? And he's just like, no, I don't know why that would be of any use, but I mean, whatever you got on you, I mean, you got a whole suit, it's got to be worth something. He's like, I'm not giving up the suit, but yeah, I'll figure out something. And he's like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of crazy gangs down here. We got the Corpse Corps, the Darklings, and Anubis gang. And he's like, oh, I already met the Anubis gang. He's like, oh, you did? Wait, are you the one who beat up a crap ton of them? And he's like, yeah. And he's just like, no, it's just word gets around quick, man. We've got to get you out of that outfit before somebody recognizes you. So they go to a clothing shop. He pulls out this little like lightsaber dagger thing he's got going, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's worth like literally anything you want. The shop owner's like, I will literally sleep with you for that if that's what you want. He's like, no, I'll take the clothes. So he walks out. He's still wearing like a gunner World War II helmet thing with a full mask on it, so he's not able to be recognized. And he's like, all right, well, tell me where this guy is who might know about the young girl. Cut to Ratcatcher, who currently has Tiffany held up in a room. She's crying out for mommy, and he's just like, oh, nope, sorry, how about accordion instead? And he starts playing some horrific music for that. Russell comes in and is like, hey, get out of here, stop playing your music, I want to talk to the girl. And Tiffany's crying, and Russell explains, like, I just want you to know this isn't personal, except it totally is, because it's all your brother's fault. This is all on him. He attacked me and left me for dead, and now I am exacting my vengeance upon him. And that is all because you are going to make so much more of a delicious treat to ruin his life with. So she's like, what if he apologizes? And he's like, no. God, you are naive. So we see that Samael's given a walkthrough to Batwing of like how the whole town functions and why the overground doesn't care that the underground even exists and how they have power and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, anyway, we're here. I can get you like, I need to find protection from speakerheads that are going to try to get me back into slavery, and you need to talk to someone, and through that room is exactly what we both need. And so he pops open the door, and inside is the entire Anubis gang, including their leader, who they call Mother. And Samael immediately is like, this guy beat up your guys, I want protection, please. And so Batwing is immediately just hit upon by a bunch of Anubis guys, and he takes care of the few that are there, like, after him pretty quickly. And so he turns to the Mother just being like, I'm just looking for a little girl and then I want to leave, so just let me do that. And she's like, you just beat up a bunch of my men, that ain't gonna happen, everyone kill this guy. So the whole Anubis group starts coming in, starts attacking, and Batwing's just like, I am so pissed off that all of this is happening, that I am running on pure adrenaline. How does Batman manage to stay so calm and collected all the time? This is maddening for me. So he manages to swing his way up to one of the girders where nobody can reach him, puts back on his Batwing gear, and he's like, all right, I got a little, like, noxious gas bomb here. I'm just going to drop that. It'll knock out everybody, and I can just take the queen. So he does that. He picks up Mother and just starts walking to the door, and she's like, I'm going to have you killed. And he's like, shut up. I just want answers. So he kicks through the door, and then standing on the other side is Russell, who is just like, put her down. And Mother seems to expect that. So, yeah, no, I mean, forward progress was made. I like how... Here's the thing. We had a Catwoman arc, and I don't blame you if you didn't watch that. We had a Catwoman arc that completely dealt with the underground, and it set up that there were like these 3 tribes, and there was all this stuff. This is ignoring that wholesale. And I'm fine with that, because this does it in one issue better than an entire arc did in Catwoman, because it's not complicating it. You just say, hey, this is Fallout, it's a vault, and we get it. We're done. You did it. Congrats. Catwoman took like 7 issues to say nothing except, hey, Joker's daughter's here. So I'm going to appreciate it a lot more just on that ground. In terms of the Russell stuff, I do kind of wish they'd speed it up a little bit. Like, this underground stuff, I'm sure it is relevant. I'm sure it is tying in well here, but it does feel like it's padding to a story that should be a lot more straightforward. But, I mean, wasn't there a whole thing of, like, Russell was sending, like, drugs out into the overworld as well? And that's just kind of not a part of this right now. Maybe it'll all come together, but for this issue, it does seem like a lot of padding of, here's how the underground works, rather than, oh yeah, my sister's been taken. So I'm going to give this one I'm going to say 7. I'm just flat 7. I don't know why. 6.5 seems a bit too harsh for it. I did enjoy the issue, especially Lucius coming in and just tearing into Batman. That worked pretty well. But all in all, it's like a 7 for me. Action Comics number 30, written by Greg Pak, art by Aaron Kuder, Jed Dougherty, and Karl Kerschl. So this is labeled as Prelude to Superman Doomed, which kind of just jumped out at me because page 1 is literally Doomsday tearing apart a bunch of polar bears. But I don't even know what that event's going to be covering yet, so just pretend like I do. Last issue, I mean, it was the end of a whole arc, but the big thing was Superman was so pissed off because this group called Tower Control, run by a woman named Harrow, was forcing Ghost Soldier to kill, like, innocent things, and he's super pissed off about that. So, first off, we pick up with Doomsday tearing apart polar bears, as I said, and we have Tower Control talking to Harrow. And they're like, oh, Jesus, Doomsday, he's here. He made it out of the Phantom Zone. Should we take him in? And Harrow's just like, dude, it's Doomsday. We can't possibly take him in. Just watch where he goes. And they see a bunch of civilians, some scientists down here in the Arctic, and they see Doomsday. They start freaking out, and Tower Control's like, oh, God, we didn't expect, like, normies to be here. Should we swoop in? Should we save them? And Harrow's like, that's weird. Doomsday should have already killed them by now, in the time it took you to ask me that question. What's up with Doomsday? So he turns away. He doesn't even care about them, but he punches down and destroys the iceberg that they are standing on, and that causes the scientists to fall to their death anyway. But Harrow points out, like, no. He wasn't doing that to kill the scientists in the most efficient way possible. He was doing it because it's the most efficient way to get to the water. What in the hell is up with Doomsday? This isn't the one we know from the 90s. So we then cut over to Superman, who's just flying around the world super fast. And he's narrating saying, hey, Pa Kent always said, if you're pissed off, count to 10. And if you're still pissed off, keep counting to 10 over and over again until you calm down. And Superman's like, I'm at 10,000 now. I don't think it's going to calm me down. So he arrives at Tower Control. He's got Ghost Soldier in his hand. And he's like, yep, I'm not sensing like any heartbeats here. These are all just Ghost Soldiers just like this guy. So I'm going to let loose with the same way I did on him. And as they all start firing on him, he unleashes his cold breath, gets him down to 0K, and they're out of the fight. So then he takes Ghost Soldier he's got in hand, throws it into the window of Tower Control, and says, hey, tell your boss that you're done. And then just starts wrecking everything inside this place with heat vision. So at this point, Harrow shows up. And with Harrow, he can hear a heartbeat. So he knows he has to hold back a little bit. And she's like, hey, you're destroying my place. Don't you usually try to like make friends with everything you come across first? And he's like, yeah, I kind of already made up my mind about you because here's all the things you did. And he lists off all the stuff we saw in the last arc of Action Comics with like Baka and the Underground and blah, blah, blah. But also says that apparently the soldiers attacked Wonder Woman, which hasn't happened yet. But apparently it happens in like the very next issue. So issue 7, check that out. Regardless, he's like, yeah, no, so you guys, I don't know anything about you, but like you've only done bad things, so give it up. And she's like, what do you mean? Hold on now, Superman. Let's look at the things you've done recently. Over in Superman Wonder Woman, you caused a nuclear explosion just to take out 2 of your enemies. Then, in the last arc of Action Comics, you upset a delicate balance of an underground race by bringing them up above ground and possibly causing, like, end times if those monsters were taken care of. And then let's not forget Forever Evil. You're the one who sparked all that by killing Dr. Light. Dude, you suck. And you suck specifically because you are just so locked in on, oh, I've got to do the right thing, that you don't think about any of the consequences for humanity, man. You are the worst. And that's why we're here to take it over. And Hera reaches down to Sawyer, the ghost soldier that we're more familiar with. And it seems he was unconscious or knocked out or something. And she's able, with this green flame power she has, to just bring him right back. And it's like, yeah, these guys here, they're all human. They chose to stay in this plane so that they could fight for the things that you should be doing, but like you're failing miserably. So just stay out of this, you stupid alien. And Superman can hear her heartbeats totally steady, and he's like, oh, okay, you're like a true believer. All right, that's going to be pissing me off more. But at that point, Hero unleashes her power. She flies off in a green flame and just busts through the window and just be like, all right, Superman, you had your chance. So as she gets outside, she resurrects an undead army with soldiers throughout history. We got Romans, World War II, Civil War, everything here. And Superman, like, they're all screaming out in agony. And Superman comes out like, whoa, if you're so for humanity, it sounds to me like you're torturing ghosts. Veteran ghosts. What's that all about? And she's like, you think I want to do this? No, this is out of necessity to get you to understand. So she sicks this undead army on Superman. Superman tries the same, like, freeze breath thing they did before, but it doesn't work. And he's actually able to get hit by them. Like, all their spears and bullets, and one of them's riding an elephant. He can feel all that. And rather than fighting against them in any meaningful capacity, he takes it. He takes each of their hits as they impale him and whatnot. And he can feel, like, their hate, their emotions flowing through him. So he's like, all right, I got to show them how to redirect that to, like, exactly where it should be. And so he pushes through all of them. He's still taking hits. And he points over at Hero and says, like, she's the one who's making you, like, not be dead anymore. And they all turn and they look at Hero and he's like, all right, sure. So they start attacking her. And she's like, ah, dang it. All right, fine. So she bathes them all in this huge green flame. They scream out in agony. And Superman's like, no, geez, what are you doing? But as the flame dissipates, we see that they're now free from her control. And they all just stand around for a second before fading into nothing. And Superman's like, what was that all about? And she's like, all right, look, usually I only bring back the willing dead, but like, this was all I had. This was all I had and a chance to be able to take you down. It didn't work. You win. Take me out. That's all it's been. And Superman's like, you and I both want what's best for humanity. Maybe we can work together. And she looks up at Superman and she says, are you goddamn kidding me? You just did it again. I am literally bringing back the dead against their will to fight against you, which is definitely evil sounding. And you are trying to be friends with me. Good. All right. You know what, Superman? Screw you. All right. We're just going to phase out here and we'll be back for you because I swear to God, you are the worst. And she phases out and just Superman's left alone in this graveyard of fallen soldiers and elephants. So we then cut back down to the Marianas Trench where there's a little squid going by a submarine. And the submarine's like, hey, Hero, we got a visual on Doomsday. And she's like, good, because Superman was stupid. What's going on with Doomsday? How's he going? And the sub is like, well, about that. And we get a visual of this, like a spine going through the squid. And it's electrified. And then we see what I can only describe as Doomsday turned into a giant evil sea urchin. It is covered in spikes with a bunch of crazy electricity coming out of it. And I don't even know what to make of that. But regardless, Superman Doomed, coming soon in a future issue. All right, so I like it. I like this idea of Hero coming through and pointing to like recent events that Superman did and saying, you keep messing up. Did you watch Man of Steel? You know the third act where they destroyed like the whole city, but then it said like, oh, but he saved us? Yeah, no, you could do better than that. And you got to stop this like nuclear exploding, causing crime syndicate stuff. It's just bad. I like Greg Pak's direction for that. It really is an interesting look at like how Superman could maybe adjust or change there. And then knowing that this is going into Superman Doomed, which I'm about 95% sure is Superman becoming Doomsday to some extent. Clearly that's going to have repercussions there as well of how much can we really trust Superman if he's Doomsday. So yeah, I'm looking forward to how this arc goes. I'm trusting Greg Pak right now and it seems to be paying off. I'm going to give this one an 8. I think it was solid the whole way through. Didn't really notice any major art shifts, so having 3 artists, that really worked out. Yeah, no, it's just a solid issue and I'm looking forward to the rest. Green Lantern number 30, written by Robert Venditti, art by Martin Coccolo. So last issue we had the final thing of Hal's taken the fight to the Coons. He's built a little group, a little advisory council in order to run this war. And also we saw a Durlin who is run out of radioactive juice to fuel his changes. So we pick up on Mogo, and Hal's just looking over the landscape. He's like, yeah, this is pretty nice. And another lantern comes up behind named Morrow, and he's like, hey, man, we're done, and we need you to go there. And he's like, geez, you sure you couldn't take any longer? I really do not want to do that. And Morrow's like, look, I get it. Some people think, the armory is what make the Green Lantern Corps. Some people think it's the barracks. Some people think it's whatever else. But the soul of the Corps is in our crypt, and we need the dedication ceremony from our leader. So Hal goes to the crypt of the Green Lanterns, now on Mogo. All these huge, beautiful gravestones. And he's like, hey, everyone, we're here to remember the fallen lanterns. And they served the Corps, dedicated. They died here for us. And we're here to say goodbye to our best, including this gravestone right here for Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner is definitely dead. There's no possible way that Kyle Rayner is still alive elsewhere. He died so that we may live. He was literally Jesus Christ, and he was my friend. Green Lantern sound off, and everyone, they sigh to that, and everyone's sad, and everyone walks away. Hal tells Mogo, all right, you don't ever let it rain here. All right, this place is to stay beautiful. And he's like, yep, will do. I'll keep my weather weird around here. So Kilowog and the rest of his little advisory corps come up and just like, yeah, you did good, Hal, you did good. And he's like, yeah, I kind of wish I could have reached out to Carol, but she hasn't been returning my calls. She really liked Kyle. So at that point, Hal says, like, I don't want anyone else to be buried here again. And Kilowog and Selak both point out, like, okay, but we're in a war, and, like, all the Green Lanterns understood that this is a fight. Like, that's part of the job, is that we may die. And your task is to win the war as quickly as possible so that as few of us die. Like, just win the war. That's the important thing, or else we're going to keep on dying. So they say, all right, let's get out of here. Let's do something. Let's bring the fight to them. So they fly out, and they reach Space Sector 571, which is a port oasis bay. And there is a Kund warship that's just parked there. And it's like, fantastic, awesome, let's go. And as they're flying in, Hal's like, hey, how do we even know this thing is here? And Selak says, oh, it's the leader of this, like, thing here. He is very familiar with the Corps. We saved him a few times. And Hal's like, cool, awesome, I'll call in reinforcements. He's like, no. It's complicated. And we see them arriving in there, and basically there's this tiny little, I'm going to call him a koala, but a tiny little furry dude, and he is the emissary here. It turns out that this place, this port, is Switzerland. It is 100% neutral in any skirmish whatsoever. It is here to take in the sick and the wounded, and like whatever side wants to meet here, they are allowed to come here. That doesn't mean that no fighting can occur, but it has to occur under very specific rules. So as the Corps is there, the Kund walk in, and they're just already ready for a fight. And that's where the emissary, his name is Pregus, he steps up and he's like, whoa, no fighting like that. You can't be doing that. And immediately Hal and the captain of the Kund here are, and his name's Captain Ku of the Kund. And he's like, throwing insults at each other, just like, oh, you ambushed our sectors. They were good lanterns. And he's like, well, how good could they be? They all died. So at that point, Pregus is like, all right, look, no fighting like that. If you want to fight, it's under very specific grounds, and it's all part of, you're going to argue with each other. That's how it's done. And Hal's like, I could easily do that. All of you. You know what? Let's make this work for both of us. If we win this little argument, then you have to give us our ship so that we can like tear it apart and look for like secrets to your group or whatever. And if you win, then you get to take us as like prisoners of war or whatever. Or me specifically, I think he says. And he's like, okay, but like you're 4 lanterns. What does it matter if you're prisoner of war? He's like, dude, I'm the leader of the Lanterns Corps. It's gonna matter. I was like, yeah, all right, that's fair. So they say, all right, sure. We'll have a little argument. And Pregus immediately puts forward like, okay, well, the argument is trial by combat. but it's specifically limited to just the captain and Hal. And Hal's like, oh, I didn't know that going in. Oopsies. So the coon says, all right, because of your customs or whatever, I get to pick the weapon. I pick knife fight. So Hal's not allowed to use his ring, and he has to fight against this coon captain in a knife fight. So we cut down to the bar of this place. And Salak's like, sorry, I probably should have been more informative as to what the customs were. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll still fight him off. And Kilowog psychs him up. He's just like, yeah, no, if anyone even can cheat death, it's Hal Jordan. And fighting the coon in a knife fight, that's death, all right. So at this point, the coon come up, and they're like looking to already start the fight. They're like, hey, man, let's go. Let's get this on. He's like, dude, sit down, have a drink with us. I'm buying. Let's just talk a little bit. And he's like, oh, what? You want to give up the fight? You want to back out, you little pansy? And he's just like, no, I'm going to kick your ass. But maybe we can settle this like, this is a neutral spot. Maybe we could like end this just by talking. And he's like, oh, talking. You want to end this little skirmish? She's like, no, I want to end the war just by talking. Like, why are you fighting with the Durlans? You're the Coons. You're a mighty race. Why are you going with like spies and secrets like that? And the Coons reveal like, hey, man, that's not on us. We just go where the war is. That's our race. We're warriors. We're not the ones deciding to cause the war. And they banter a little bit, but it ends up being that the coon come to respect Hal, and Hal's like, wish I could say the same. Guys kind of suck. So we see the fight in the negotiating room start, and immediately Hal is just bruised lip on his back. He's done for. And the coon continue like kicking him, telling him to forfeit, and he's just like, oh yeah, you think that's going to be enough for me? So he manages to get a punch in, knocks the coon's helmet off. Fight continues on a little bit, but Hal points out the coon race keep on charging in. They never retreat, and they put all of their weight into it, which is how Hal manages to turn it around. He uses the charging to get like him off his balance and continue charging into a wall, and it turns out that wall already had a knife embedded in it from earlier on. So he gets the coon to embed himself on his own knife, and the coon captain is dead. So, or at least he's dying. So Hal turns to Preakis. He's like, yo, get us the infirmary. We got to get him healed up. And all the other coon come in just being like, back off, man. We're going to take care of this the coon way. And they stab him some more until he dies. Then Hal's like, Jesus, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I just had to hold funerals for all of my friends today. And here you are killing your own soldiers because your backwards way says that it needs to be that way. And the coon flash back with like, yeah, man, that's our way. Why do you think the Green Lantern Corps are hated so much? It's because you guys think you're the morality police. You don't respect the way that our culture does things. And you say it has to be your way. That's why we hate you so much. So let us do our thing already, man. And yeah, that's pretty much where it leaves off. So we do get one final thing. The Durlan who no longer had his radioactive stuff, he starts transforming again as like tendrils start coming out. Green Lantern comes in and he's like, oh, not very smart of you coming back here even after your cachet ran out. And the Durlan seems to recognize this lantern. The lantern's not immediately attacking him, so seems that this fishy looking lantern is fishy. And the Durlan's like, hey, like, fine, arrest me, just let me feed. I need to be able to feed. But then the Green Lantern says, I can't allow you to live. And he kills the Durlan, just straight up murders him. So at this point, the Lantern who killed him, his name is Muck Muck. He calls in for backup. He's like, hey, I found the Durlan. So they all see the Durlan's body. They're like, dude, we were supposed to leave him alive for questioning. It's just like, hey, transform into a giant monster. I had to kill him. So they say, all right, fine, whatever. Bring him back to HQ. It looks like we finally found our spy. And meanwhile, Muck Muck gives a very devious smile. So next issue in this is part of the Uprising crossover. I think it's just with Green Lantern Corps, so as much as you can call it a crossover, as much as the entire rest of this series has been a crossover with that. Beyond that, I think this is a fine issue. I like this thing of Hal being called out for basically saying, like, yeah, you guys, like, you want to get for crimes or whatever, sure, why not? But, like, even with the customs, you're not letting us do our thing. And there's evidence for that over the rest of this run as well. I like that viewpoint of, they can't be the morality police, But Hal is so dead set on being that to an extent. So I'm liking those turns. I want to see how that comes out a bit more. Whatever the Jurgens are doing, honestly, it seems like it's much more in the Green Lantern core book rather than just Green Lantern. So we'll get it more over there. But I'm going to say this one is I think this is a 8. I like it. I really do enjoy this little banter that they've got. And I like the fact of Hal's trying to do diplomacy, even if he absolutely sucks at it. So more of that. I enjoy it. Earth 2, number 22, written by Tom Taylor, art by Nicola Scott. So last issue, biggest thing that happened was that evil Superman learned of the existence of another Kryptonian, and that's no good. But we pick up this issue with Alan Scott Green Lantern, and it was like, hey, what happened to him, right? So 2 weeks ago, he was beaten down by evil Superman, and he laid down and he was just totally out of it, and then the Green was like, no, we're not done with you. And it recovered him. It brought him back up. But in that instant, that's when Superman, blew up the continent. And Alan Scott along with it. And it says that his green power left him and he died in the, giant mountains of skulls that were around there. However, the Green once again was like, all right, I'm still not done with you. And it healed up Alan Scott. He's now completely naked at this point. But he comes to with his green ring and he's like, I'm angry. I'm angry at being killed. I'm angry at what happened to the world. And I am going to get my vengeance. So that's all happening. But then we cut over to the Batcave and Dr. Fate's still talking crazy. And he says the word green. And Jimmy Olsen and Red Arrow are both hearing this, and they're like, I don't know what green means, but I have been able to figure out the rest of the stuff. So he says, the Queen, that represents Aquawoman, says Angel in the Slaughter, that represents Hawkgirl. He says the child, that's definitely you, Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy's like, I'm not a child, I'm 13. Hawkgirl's like, you're a child, stop acting like you're not. So at that point, we cut over to Lois and Val Zod, and Val is freaking out at the mirror a little bit, and Lois is like, you cool? And he's like, no, I can't shave. And he shows a completely mangled and busted up razor, and Lois is like, yeah, your invulnerability's starting to kick in. You used to be able to laser beam, that's what Clark would do, into the mirror to shave off, but we don't know how invulnerable you are, and you also don't even have your laser eyes yet, so let's not do that. Just go hairy for a while. And Lois sees herself in the mirror, and she's like, oh, I'm still not totally used to the fact that I'm Red Tornado. It's kind of weird still. So she says, all right, look, we both need to get out of here for a little bit. Let's go. Let's take Hawkgirl with. But first we cut over to the secret science facility where Superman has the two Mr. Terrifics held captive. And he's just about to punch the ever-loving crap out of the older one. I can't remember his name right now. And Terry Sloan, that's it. And Dr. Bedlam's like, whoa, hold up. We need him. I've already got the information about the Kryptonian. Don't punch him. And so Bedlam starts saying, yep, his name was Val Zod. Somehow he left Krypton the same time as you, but showed up significantly later. And he was being kept underground in a facility. And that's why, nobody knew about him. And it was breached just before our soldier showed up. So Bedlam pulls up some surveillance footage, shows that Aquawoman was the one behind it, but then Superman notices in the background a shot of Batman, and he's like, that's impossible. And because he's here, that means that screw the Kryptonian, that dude is our biggest threat right now. If Batman's alive, he's gonna because Batman himself into this plan. We gotta take him out stat. So we cut over to a cliff face where Red Tornado and Val Zod are, and he's like, hey, yeah, from this angle, I can see so much further. And, when I was inside of my cell, inside of my home, I didn't want to leave. I was so afraid of everything that I couldn't see, but now I can see so much further, so I guess I don't have any reason to be afraid of that either. And she's like, you're really taking this well, and your powers are moving fast. Let's see if you can do more than that. But he's like, oh, hold on, I can hear what you guys are saying. Batman wants to use me as a weapon. He's like, he wants to use you as a tool. Much better than a weapon. And he's like, okay, but he still wants to use me. It's like, yeah, well, Batman just does that. So either way, I understand it's not your world to fight for yet, but hopefully soon it will be. And he says, my parents, the Zods, thought that violence was stupid and there's no reason to ever do that. We should be able to talk. And Lois is like, yeah, they're right, but we're not fighting today. This is all about just figuring out your powers. So he takes Val Zod's hand, and they both jump off the cliff, and we see Tornado is allowing Val to fly, just flying alongside with him, holding his hand. And he's just like, oh, yeah, this is incredible. I'm having so much fun. And she's like, oh, yeah, I used to spend, I can understand why my husband spent so much time just flying around before. And Val says, it's okay to let go. I feel like I'm safe. And he gets let go of, and he just starts falling to the ground. He's like, nope, not okay. And he crashes into a tree. But he's fine, and he starts floating back up again. So Hawkgirl at this point comes in just being like, well, he's not graceful, is he? He's like, he's not supposed to be. He's literally learning how to fly. He's going to be like a baby bird for a while. So at that point, Hawkgirl's like, all right, well, we got to pack this up. And she's like, why? He's like, oh, you're a robot. You got some sort of supervision. Look over there. And we see a bunch of parademons just flying in full tilt. And Red Tornado's like, hey, Val, let's go. We got to go now. And he's like, oh, don't worry about me. I can fly. And he's like, yeah, they're not really the part we're worried about. So the parademons start coming in. And she's like, too late. Val, just get back to the home base. Don't stop for anything. We got to go. And Red Tornado starts using her powers along with Hawkgirl, using her guns to fight off as many parademons as possible. But Lois is caught off guard because Superman flies in and is just coming full speed right at Lois. And she freaks out. She puts up her arm, says no, but Superman doesn't give a damn. He just flies straight past her, taking Lois entirely off guard, and she starts getting attacked by parademons. So Hawkgirl's also getting attacked. She gets her wing bitten into, but Superman, again, doesn't care, flies straight past, goes straight for Val Zod, punches him in the back, and just drives him into the ground. So as Hawkgirl's falling out of the sky, Lois comes to her senses. She comes up and she grabs Hawkgirl, lands her down on the ground. And as Superman is like, hey, Darkseid doesn't need another Kryptonian. You're expendable. And he's about to like punch out Val Zod's lights. Lois steps up and just be like, Clark, it's me. It's Lois. And that's enough to get Clark to lower his heat vision. And he's like, Lois? So that seems like it's going to result in good things if it weren't for the cover to the next issue being right here where they're punching at each other. But yeah, no, I'm down with this. I like the time it's taking with Val Zod. It'd be so easy to just do a time skip and say, and now I have Superman powers. But they're taking it slower. They're saying, okay, his invulnerability developed. He's getting a little bit of supervision. He is able to fly, however clumsily that is, but he doesn't know how to do things like heat vision or cold breath or I guess that's about the scope of it. But regardless, I think that taking it slow like this, and especially having Lois be that bridge here, because she's the one who understood Superman better than anyone else. Bring into that the fact that now Superman knows Batman's back around. We have Fury, who is, I believe, Wonder Woman's daughter. I think it's been established. So all that stuff's going on. We're getting the original Trinity back in some way. I'm liking the direction Tom Taylor's taking this. I think my only critique right now is that the Bat Gang is also kind of just stuck waiting for Val Zod to develop his powers. And so everyone just kind of feels like they're sitting around not doing anything. I think it would be better for there to be some sort of side goal, some other thing that they could at least be doing at this point, rather than just everyone hanging out saying, hey, Dr. Fate's still crazy. But beyond that, this one's still like a solid 8. I enjoyed this issue a lot. Takes it slow. It's a little decompressed, but I'm down for that in this book. It's better than everything moving at 1,000 miles an hour. Green Arrow number 30, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. Last issue, Green Arrow got shot in the head by Komodo in front of everybody. Hard to get away with that. But this issue picks up, and we show Oliver is outside the cathedral where all the outsiders are, and he's scoping it out. He's saying like, oh, they got to be in there. My half sister Emiko's got to be in there, and I left my dad and Shadow out on an island. For anybody who forgot about that, I'm not getting any help. It's just me going in here, and this is definitely the right cathedral because it's the only one that's owned by Komodo. So he's about to swoop into business when all of a sudden someone grabs his arm, and turns out it's his dad. It's Robert Queen and Shadow are there, and he's like, "What? How did you get out there?" He's like, "Son, seriously, come on. I was like a millionaire. I have other helicopters on that island. I took one out. Did you seriously expect to go in there on your own?" And he's like, "Yes, I do. And both of you are awful people and you're dead to me. So I don't want to hear anything about it." And he's like, "All right, whatever, but this isn't just your fight. This involves us. My child is in there. So yeah, I'm going to be involved anyway. I'm going after Komodo." So they all swoop in, and Robert says, "Be ready for anything." And as they crash through the stained glass, all the other Outsiders clans they look up, they're like, "Oh, geez, what's going on?" And then Robert is just immediately there at LaCroix, and he's like, "Give me my daughter and put your hands down." And then Oliver sees the dead Oliver on the ground, and he's like, "Who the hell is that? And why does he look like me?" And then the dead body sits up, and he's like, "Don't recognize me? I'm the 7th tribe, the 7th weapon, the mask." And he pulls out the arrow and starts to transform. Turns out it's Magus, or Magus, however you want to pronounce that. That's the 7th tribe of weaponry, is, like spycraft and secret stuff. So Magus is that. So either way, the Outsiders clans are commanded by Onyx of the Fist clan and Komodo to go and attack them. But Emiko's there and it's just like, "Hey, that guy is my dad. What's that about?" And he's like, "Oh, don't worry. That's just your evil mom's trickery. That's definitely not your dad. We got to get out of here, though, like right now." So they start fighting against, and there's just too many against the 4 of them, including Magus. And at that point, Magus is like, "That's your cue. Get in here." And in comes the Axe clan, who's one of the rogue clans that doesn't side with the rest of them, and Katana, who also showed up. And Krino's like, "Hey, Katana, we're on Justice League America together." And she's like, "Yeah, right. Probably won't bring this up." So they join in the fight, and now the Axe, Sword, and Arrow and Mask clans are going up against the Fist, the Spear, and maybe Shield's still here. I think Shield got defeated out on the island. So regardless, everyone's accounted for, and it's the War of the Outsiders. So big fights going on. Komodo's like, "Yeah, no, we gotta bail now. Let's just get our way out of here." And Onyx is like, "Hey, look, I got this. Get out of here. You take care of your end." So Emiko's still like, "Daddy, seriously, what's going on, man? All of this seems to contradict everything you've ever told me in my whole life." And she's like, "Don't worry about it. Let's get out of here." So at that point, Shadow is commanded by Robert, "Go get our daughter, get her to be safe." And she's like, "Oh, are you sure? I don't want to leave you again." And he's like, "Dude, get my daughter." So Shadow goes off. Onyx also leaves the fight in order to do something. Basically, everybody manages to leave, except Magus and Katana are staying in, but all the other characters bail out on their own accord. So we cut to Seattle, maximum security prison. We see Count Vertigo is inside of a cell. And guard comes up and says, "Hey, you got a visitor." And he's like, "Oh, you will address me as your lordship, and I don't have any visitors. I have no friends." And then up steps Richard Dragon, good old Dickie Dragon. And he's like, "Hey, I'm taking over Seattle. It's now mine. And I think that we should have a partnership. What do you say, Count Vertigo?" And wouldn't you know it, he gets a little smile on his lips. So Komodo and Emiko are making their way across this big bridge, and Emiko just puts her foot down and says, like, "Well, okay, I'm not going anywhere else until I get some straight answers. Tell me the truth, because it feels like you've been lying to me for a while now." And Shadow's like, "Yeah, Komodo, why don't you tell the truth?" And got an arrow pointed right at him. And she basically says, "It's okay, honey. I'm here for you. Just come over to me closely." And Komodo's like, "Nope, don't do it." And he pulls out an arrow. They both shoot each other. Komodo gets just nicked in the face a little bit, but Shadow takes a full hit to the shoulder. And we see Oliver and Robert are making their way to the bridge as well. And Oliver's like, "How do you know they went this way?" He's like, "Well, you said that you stopped something down by the dockside. This is the fastest way to get to water. So yeah, this is clearly where he's going to be." And He's very concerned about Emiko, and Oliver's like, wow, so cool of you to care about your kid. Where was that a couple years ago, Dad? And immediately Robert just turns around and punches him in the face, being like, that is enough. I did what I had to do to make you the hero you are today. This is all how it had to be. And yeah, it worked out. And Oliver points out, like, you didn't make me this way. Yeah, you gave me like the training or whatever, but the thing that made me the hero was I had to sit by Mom's bedside when she was sick with cancer. And she faced that with bravery and determination to leave a better world behind. Where the hell were you? And he just fully lays on to his dad of like, you were off playing secret agent when your wife died. That's why you're dead to me. And that's why I will hate you until the day you actually die. And at that point, like Robert tries to like get it a little bit out. He's like, I picked up the totem arrow. I saw the future. I did what I had to do. And he's just like, nah, not worth it. Not a good enough excuse. So at that point, they hear Shadow scream in pain as she gets hit with the arrow. And they come up. They've got their bows drawn. And Robert's like, it's over. We've got 2 arrows on you. Do not do this. And he's just like, hey, Robert, how the hell did you fake your death, man? That seems like super complicated. Did you team up with Magus? Because you do understand he is immortal and he will betray you. Like, do not trust that dude. And at that point, Robert pulls out the totem arrow and is just like, here it is, man. It's the totem arrow. I picked it up and I saw the future. And like, I realized that what's important is I need to get my family back. And he's just like, yeah, all right, well, here they are. Every part of the family's here, right? And at this point, Oliver's the one who's got the arrow trained on Komodo. Robert tells him to take the shot. And Komodo's like, you think you're going to be able to beat me before I shoot Shadow? And then Emiko steps in the way of Shadow. Just be like, Dad, don't shoot my mom. Like, I'm not going to let you hurt her. And Komodo's like, Emiko, I love you, but I will kill you to stop them from getting their hands on you. Do not think that I am above that. And at that point, Robert's like, all right, this is getting too much. Oliver, do it. And he lets loose the arrow, which then Komodo also lets loose his arrow. Komodo gets hit in the shoulder, taking him out a little bit, and Robert jumps in the way of Komodo's arrow, taking it to the back through his heart to protect Emmy. So Robert's dead, probably for real. I'm sure we'll get a nice little conversation after, like in the next issue, breaking down like everything that happened there, and maybe Oliver will forgive him, maybe he won't, but it'll be an interesting dichotomy for sure. I love it. Like, this whole arc has just been fantastic, the way it set everything up. I love the reveal of the 7th tribe here being Magus, and that explains why he's involved in all this outsider stuff to begin with. No, it's a solid issue. The only critique I'll give it is that things kind of got a little bit messy there during the fight sequence, just in terms of I couldn't tell who was leaving with who, and like I thought Onyx was leaving the fight, but she didn't show up anywhere here, so maybe she's off doing something else. And then I didn't see Robert leave the fight as well, but apparently he went off with Oliver. So yeah, it's got a little bit messy in the middle there, but the rest of it, super enjoyed. And then just 1 2-page spread devoted to getting Vertigo not only out of jail, but teaming up with good old Dickie Dragon. That's all you needed. I'm glad they did. They didn't bother to deal with like the Diggle subplot here. You needed the emphasis to be on this fight. So yeah, I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it a 8.5. It's very close to the 9, but I don't know. It's just missing a little bit of something. I can't quite describe what to get me up onto that 9. Probably if the next issue lands it, like really lands it, that's where it's going to happen. StormWatch number 30, written by Sterling Gates, art by Jeremy Roberts. So the past, how many issues here? It was issue 19, everything switched over. So the past 10 issues, none of that happened. Just the whole alternate timeline, the collective coming in and changing everything. It did happen. The characters mentioned it, but like they got better. So we pick up underneath Salt Lake City, and we see Apollo and Midnighter are just beating the ever-loving crap out of a bug empire that has set up base here. And Midnighter makes a point of saying, we were only in that parallel timeline for a couple weeks, but God, it's good to be back. So that's pretty much explanation as we get for it. There's a couple other things that they briefly mention, but yeah, that just all of the previous 10 issues. It's just like, oh, wait, hold on, we're back now. So we pick up now on the Carrier, which is different from the Eye of the Storm as before. It is a new ship. Everything's been set up differently, and they are still in the bleed. It's still that basic thing, but it's just a new ship. So Apollo and Midnighter come through a door with the head of the Bug Queen, and they come up to Engineer being like, hey, we brought you a souvenir, what's up? And she is interfacing with the ship. She's trying to get everything all sorted out on this new ship, and she kind of blacks out for a second, like her eyes go black, and she's like, sorry, I'm still trying to deal with the ship, everything's a little bit wonky crazy and whatnot. And we get a few things referenced here. First is that Jack Hawksmoor, the guy who talks to cities, he's on a sabbatical ever since he got wiped from the previous timeline, pretty much. They are currently on the run from the Shadow Lords, the people who were in charge of StormWatch. As soon as the collective thing happened, they just took the ship and ran. So the Shadow Lords are currently after them, and they are outlaws from them. And then Jenny Quantum is back. It's no longer Jenny Soule, and she is a 14-year-old girl who is spending her Friday nights where she should be, out on a date with a boy. And all of the narration from this point, all the dialogue boxes are from the perspective of Jenny writing in her diary of this night she had with this cute boy named Toby. And Toby, they're out at a concert. Jenny snuck him in and knew him from school or whatever. And Toby was so cool, but he's just acting weird here. He's like totally distant, and Jenny's trying to get him to open up, and he's just totally shutting it down until finally they come to a curb, and they're sitting together, and it looks like Toby's about to go in for a kiss, and Jenny's like, oh my god, I've never been kissed before. But just before it happens, an alert goes off that there's something going on. StormWatch needs her around, and she's like, oh god, I'm sorry, I don't want you in the weird part of my life. I gotta go. And she runs away, takes the door to LA where the thing is happening. It turns out the thing is a bunch of buildings, skyscrapers down in LA are just coming to life, and they are stomping around and destroying what is left of the city. And Apollo and Midnighter are already on the scene. They're trying to contain things what they can. Midnighter says he's actually fighting City Hall. And we see Jenny coming up and start trying to fight against it. And all of her stuff here is basically just narration saying, like, here's what StormWatch is. It was a team that was made by Merlin and alien threats and blah, 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 the Shadow Lords and all that stuff there. But she starts just using her quantum powers, blasting through buildings. We have Midnighter's using his ability to perfectly know fighting styles and stuff like that to direct Apollo on how to tear through a building in order to take it down. Engineer is kind of having a hard time keeping this under wraps because StormWatch is supposed to be a secretive thing. She's like, hey, I'm going to have to reach out to an old friend in order to get this taken care of. Also, Jack Hawksmoor is definitely off the table, despite this being a city thing. So she goes and talks to former member, the Projectionist, who is currently taking a bath. And she's like, nope, I quit StormWatch. I'm not a part of it anymore. And Engineer's like, okay, but like, come on, you're not actually able to quit StormWatch. This is kind of like a running thing. We just need your help on this one thing, all right? And she's like, fine, whatever, but we're even now for all that stuff I owed you with before. She's like, done. So Projectionist, her whole thing is she can go onto social media and just change it. Like, she's able to alter the internet. So people are taking pictures of the destruction in LA, and she just replaces it with pictures of puppies. So we see Midnighter, Apollo, and Jenny are all trying to fight against this, and Engineer says, hey, I finally located the signal that's causing all these buildings to come up. It's underground. You and Midnighter need to go down and do it, Jenny. So they start walking through a subway tunnel, and Jenny points up like, hey, Midnighter, you're okay with the dark, right? And he's like, I love the dark. The dark's the best thing ever. And Jenny's like, so why are you dating Apollo? And Midnighter's like, because feelings are complicated. Sometimes they need to be used as a weapon, but sometimes you need to be able to open yourself up to them. You'll learn the difference one day. And Jenny points out, like, they keep on trying to train me because they know I'm eventually going to take over StormWatch, but, like, sometimes they don't make any goddamn sense. So at this point, they finally make their way to the signal. The radio comms get jammed, and as they look down into the area, wouldn't you know it, it's Jack Hawksmoor. He's being possessed by a giant alien cube, and that's why the cities are going nutso. And so Midnighter's like, hey, Jenny, you stay back. We don't know if this is a trap that was designed for Jack or if it's like a general threat recognizing trap. And as soon as he takes a step forward, it takes him in too. So it's just a general threat recognizing one. So Jenny starts trying to blast at it. It's not doing anything. Apollo's handling things upstairs. And as it starts blasting back at Jenny, Jenny's like, yeah, because I'm a century baby, I can't die until the year 2100. Like, I'm just 100% safe for that. Even I don't understand how that works. But regardless, if my quantum powers aren't going to be able to do this, I have one trick in my arsenal that only works because I'm a 14-year-old girl. Emotional blackmail. And she does the whole crying out to Jack thing. She's like, Jack, please. I want to be a good team leader, but I need people like you who believe in me. Help me. And that tears Jack away emotionally enough that it upsets the system of this cube that's possessing him, and Jenny's able to destroy it. And Jenny's like, cool, that worked. All right. Hey, Jack, how's it going? Engineer, we've taken out the cube. Everything's all cool. And at that point, we cut to the Shadow Lords, and the Shadow Lords are like, yo, new Shadow Lord guy. We brought you in. You said this would work. It didn't. What the hell? And the new Shadow Lord's like, oops. Guess we're just going to have to keep on chasing StormWatch for the rest of our lives. And it's revealed that the new Shadow Lord is actually Adam 1, who was the previous leader before he was like vaporized back in like issue 6. So he's clearly working for StormWatch, infiltrating the Shadow Lords. So anyway, Jenny goes back to Toby. Toby's like, I don't even want to go to school anymore, man. School's like so beneath me. And then Jenny runs in, gives him a big kiss and says, hey, my life is weird and we're never going to meet again, but I just wanted to kiss you. Bye. And then Midnighter comes up to be like, stay in school and forget you ever saw us. And Toby's like, okay. So a bunch of aliens show up outside of Earth's atmosphere. They're about to launch a full-scale attack. And before they or even have a chance to like say a word to their like first mates or whatever, Captain gets a call over the comm, and it's like, what? How could they have possibly contacted us already? We just showed up. And StormWatch pops over, and Jenny's the one giving the cry, and she's like, hey, we're StormWatch. We protect the Earth. We saw you guys coming from Alpha Centauri, and we've been following you the whole way since. There's no way you can sneak up on us. We have killed the Collective. We've killed all these other things. We are better than you. This is your only warning to leave now. Peace. She hangs up the call. And that's it. That's how StormWatch ends. So here's the thing. I like this issue because I like this continuity a hell of a lot more than I liked Jim Starlin's thing. But it still feels like kind of disrespectful. I'm not putting that on Sterling Gates. Sterling Gates was brought in for this issue. He knew it was the last one. And he essentially was told by editorial, hey, get the pieces back on the table here. All right, just get everything back to the way it was. But like, I mean, doesn't that just feel kind of scummy? Like, even though I didn't like the timeline, the fact that for just a single issue, they couldn't just let Jim Starlin's thing just be like, okay, and then we'll reboot it down the line. They're like, no. We have to specifically say, before we cancel this book, that none of your stuff is still in continuity. Like, that has to be gone. That just feels so, like, disrespectful to me. That's insane. Regardless, I think this is a solid issue. If it wasn't for the fact that it was canceled, I would be very pumped for what happens next. Jenny's obviously taking more of a leading role, where she never really did that in the previous books. So I'm going to say this is... I'll give it an 8. I'll give it a solid 8. It's just barely crossing that line, but I think I'm mostly giving it an 8 because the last 10 issues of this book have just kind of been like, for me the whole way through. So it's just nice by comparison. But as for a final issue, it's a choice. It's a choice to cap it off by just saying, like, and then we went back to normal. The end. The Movement number 11, written by Gail Simone, art by Freddie Williams II. So, kind of a little standalone issue here as we approach the ending. We open up with a bus coming into Coral City, and we see a man stepping off of it, and he is dressed in, like, I don't know how you describe it, old-timey Catholic gear. Think like Amish, but more. So he steps off the bus, he talks to some cops and says, excuse me, constables, I need to know my way around town. And they're like, yeah, no kidding, dude. So turns out that this guy is, I mean, it's pretty obvious to begin with. He's the brother of Burden and therefore he's here to come bring him back home. So we cut over to just this random street down in the Tweens, and Virtue, Holly, is on a date with Rainmaker, Sarah, from like issue 4. They finally managed to get together. Obviously, in a previous issue, Holly had to call off the date that they previously had, so now they're just going out for ice cream. And they're walking down, and they're like, yeah, this isn't exactly the most romantic location, but... And then they end up kissing and having a good time regardless. So, prostitute or someone approaches this religious dude. I'm sure he has a name, but, like, I can't remember. It's Jacob. There we go. So, approaches Jacob. And he's like, "Be gone with you, harlot. I have no need for your wares." So we see it's probably a separate soup kitchen, but it may very well be the sweatshop. And that is where Burden and Catharsis are just handing out meals to, like, homeless people. And one of them comes up and says, "Oh, thank you, son." And Burden's like, "What? You're not my father. I don't ever want to see my father again." And Catharsis is like, "No, he's just saying that. It's like a term of endearment." But then the very next person in line is Jacob, who's like, "Brother, I'm here to take you home. You will answer for your sins." And immediately Catharsis is like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Back off, bro. We don't want any trouble here." And he just backhands her and starts punching her mercilessly to the point where Burden has to intervene and be like, hey, don't, I'll stop hitting her. I will do whatever needs doing. I'm going to come back with you. And immediately he's just like, "I'm sorry, did you just, like, speak up to me and tell me to stop? How dare you go against the will of God himself?" And Burden's like, "I'm sorry. I'm saying I'm going with you." So he, like, tells Catharsis as she's passed out, like, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I have to go, just forget about me." And then a bunch of other people here who are all part of, like, the movement, they've all wearing their masks, and they're like, "Hey, man, we see you, we're calling for help, you're not gonna get away with this." And he's just like, "Jesus Christ, this is pathetic. All right, let's go." So sometime later, we see Catharsis getting cleaned up by Virtue. The whole crew is there, and Virtue uses her powers to, like, feel out the guy and see what emotions he was feeling, and apparently he is just 100% pure hate and rage. That's all he is, down to his core. And she's like, "Jesus, man, usually some people have some other stuff, but, like, that's it." So at that point, Catharsis says, "Yeah, I don't know where they went, but after he ended up hitting me, there were some feathers on the ground." And she's like, "So? That's probably from your wings." And she's like, "No, I wasn't wearing my wings. It's from him." And we see that Jacob is Angel from the X-Men. He's got a giant pair of, like, angel wings, and he's flying Burden back home to wherever it is. And apparently it's a place called Hammond's Dell, which is just this, like, hasn't changed since the 1700s sort of town. So they land in town, and Jacob's like, "Hey, I'm going to go get cleaned up and pray. You do the same. Get out of here." And as Burden lands, immediately a dude comes in being like, "You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here. We all wanted you to stay banished, but your brother's the only one who says that you should come home and face trial. You suck, Burden." He's like, "Yeah, you're right. I totally do. I am the worst." And he just immediately starts, like, crying and praying until night falls. And the whole town comes up around him holding torches. And just like, "Well, it's time for your trial, Christopher. We're going to see if the Lord will have mercy on you and your demon soul." And he's just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And they say, "Do you acknowledge that you have sin in you?" And they see, like, all the demon forms that he can take. And he's like, "Yeah, but, like..." And he's like, no, but, like, you've committed sin. That's it. All right, he remembers. So, do you have your testimony as to, like, what's going to happen? And he's like, "Yes, we are going to take this hot, fiery iron and brand him, and that will be his punishment. But it's going to take some time to heat up. So, Jacob, why don't you give your story as to, like, what happened here?" And Jacob tells a story about how he was, like, the perfect son. He saw a young Burden come into the world, and he's saying, like, "Oh, I've always cared for him so much," but he started acting out and he started doing, like, evil things, and I tried to save his soul, I really did, but in the end he ended up murdering our father. And you see, that's what the narration says, but you see in the art that he, as soon as Burden was born, he came up and be like, "That kid's a sign of the devil. He's literally the worst." And then Jacob takes Burden down to the fishing hole and just starts drowning him and beating the ever-loving crap out of him. And he convinces his father that Burden has like this Satan spawn side of him, and therefore he is like whipped mercilessly and beaten with a belt. And it basically all comes down to this tipping point where one day Burden's woken up in the middle of the night, and the brother says like, "Hey, Burden, come here," and he leads him to their body of their dead father, and it's like, "You did this. You woke up in the middle of the night and you killed our father, and you don't even remember it." And he's like, "Oh my God, I didn't know I was able to do that." So yeah, basically it's coming down to the fact that because even from this young age, Jacob had like angel wings and always said like godly things, people just believed him wholesale, even though he had this deep evil spirit inside of him. Whereas Burden is the opposite. He's got like a demonic transformation, and therefore nobody believes him despite the fact that he is a good soul. So at that point, that's why he had to leave, and he spreads open his wings. He's got the hot iron, and he's like, "All right, time for judgment, brother." And he's about to stab the hot iron to his brother. And of course, the movement arrive. They track down Jacob flying here. And so they all jump into the fight. We see Catharsis versus Jacob, just straight going at each other. And Virtue comes into Free Burden and is like, "Hey, he's lying. He's just, none of that was true. He has ruined your entire childhood for nothing." And she points out the pair of them are both mutants. They both have this extra gene that allows them to alter their own flesh, to transform. But it's not like voluntary, it's subconscious. And because they made Burden feel like such a demonic presence, that's why he has demon transformations. He would have been another angelic one if they had only treated him that way from birth. So at that point, hearing that, Burden transforms into his demon thing. He goes after Jacob, and he's like, "You lied. You killed our father. How dare you?" And he's like, "Yeah, it was me. I did it. I have this black soul, but no one's ever going to believe you. You're the worst." And he's just like, "Fine, whatever." And so he takes Jacob and he pushes him into the coals where they were heating the fire and says, "Now it's time for your judgment." So the rest of the movement, I mean, it's a whole thing there where he's like, "Oh, you can't take him away. He's the family. He has to stand trial here." And they're all like, No. He's family with us. You guys aren't family anymore." So they pack up. They start making their way out of the town. Virtue calls back being like, "Don't come back again. Don't come looking for us or it will not end well for you." And Burden, in his last little triumphant bit, turns around and he's like, "Hey, by the way, I also like boys." Got him. And just walks away and says, "I'm with my real family now, and that's all that matters." Yeah, I liked it. It's definitely a one shot. It's weird because if you read the descriptions of these on DC Universe Infinite, this apparently was supposed to be an arc that was being like seeded over the past 2 or 3 issues, but clearly once they found out that they were being canceled at issue 12, they were like, "Well, may as well just put it all into one because we got to move quick there." So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I think it's an interesting enough thing. We gave Burden a little bit of closure as to like who he was, what his backstory is. I don't think we really needed that for any of the other characters, but because he was the new guy at the start of the series, it makes sense that we wrap him up at the end of it. Yeah, no, I would say it was a decent issue. It did a good job of saying like nature versus nurture and all that sort of stuff, and how people who look godly are different from the people who act godly. So I'm going to give this one I don't know. It feels like a 7.5, I would say. It's a decent issue, not quite great, but it's a good way to start moving to the end here. The Phantom Stranger, number 18, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Fernando Blanco. So I'm sure that after Forever Evil Blight ended, the writer was like, "Hey, we might have picked up some new readers. Let's just do a pacer issue, just to remind everybody, here's what Phantom Stranger is all about." So we pick up in Metropolis, and Superman is looking over the city, and he's like, "I have been anxious all day, and I don't know why. I don't really ever get anxious, so something's going on." And as he's flying about the town, all of a sudden he is accosted by a ton of ghosts that are just chasing down after him, saying like, "You killed us, this is your fault, you're the one who did all this." And one of the ghosts is Dr. Light. So We cut over to the penthouse of Dr. 13, where Phantom Stranger and Zoriel are currently hanging out. And they're just pontificating. They're just like, yeah, no, Forever Evil Blight, that was crazy. We went through a whole hell of a lot, right? And Zoriel basically says, like, all right, here's the thing. You are so dead set on finding your own path now, free from the source or God or whatever you want to call it. I'm kind of feeling a little bit antsy too. I mean, I still love the guy. He's super cool, but like I kind of want to see who I am and down here in this world. And as he's saying that, he just falls to his knees and like collapses. And he's just like, yeah, sorry. It's because of all the stuff that happened in Blight. I had my wings ripped off, you know? It takes a lot out of you. So at that point, Terrence 13 comes in saying like, hey, yeah, no, you rest, dude. Phantom, I need you to come here and help me out. So they head up to his little examination room and they're like, all right, so there's pockets in the world where creepy stuff just happens all the time. I just got a reading of creepy stuff happening, but it's in an area where creepy stuff usually doesn't happen. And he's like, oh, really? It's a totally normal part of the world? And he's like, oh, I wouldn't say normal, but like not creepy. So we cut back over to Superman, who's still being accosted by a bunch of ghosts. And like Dr. Light, for those who don't know, was killed by Superman via heat vision that was triggered because of a whole bunch of stuff. But regardless, Superman is not really responsible for his death, but he kind of is. So Dr. Light's like, oh, you killed me. You must pay. Everything is all your fault and whatnot. And then Phantom Stranger shows up and says, hey, leave him alone. Everyone bail. And he just blasts away all the ghosts. And Superman is shook. He's like, oh my God, it is my fault. It's all my fault. And he just breaks down crying. He's like, oh, Jesus, this is me. This is all on me. And Stranger's like, what are you talking? You've never killed like anybody. That's not you, man. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I don't save everybody. Like, I'm not out there pushing myself to 100%. I'm letting all these people die through things that I should be able to stop. And Phantom Stranger's like, dude, here's the thing. Those ghosts, they're not real ghosts. Whatever that is, it's tapping into your subconscious. It found a big old pocket of guilt that you didn't even know was there. And it's playing on that. Don't worry about it. It's not on you, okay? And Stranger tries to, like, reach out for him and say it's all going to be okay. And Superman just punches a wall, just being like, no, it's no excuse. I need to do better. I got to do better. And he flies back off. So at this point, Stranger notices there's a big green crack in the sky. And he's like, oh, okay, that seems like a crack in creation itself. That's an issue. So we gotta deal with that. So at that point, Stranger, like, goes supersized. He's towering over Metropolis. Only Superman can see him. And he's just like stopping. He's like, look, I'm in a corporeal form. You can't stop me, but like, I got to be able to talk to you. You are literally the best man alive. There is no way that you should be able to fall to this. And then Superman just punches through his corporeal form. And Stranger's like, that shouldn't be able to happen. I guess Superman is able to interact with me because so many people have faith in him that he has essentially become his own little mini religion. He is his own god. So he's able to interact with like spiritual stuff. So regardless, we cut over to Cassandra Kraft, who was part of the Blight storyline. She's a blind magician sort of thing. And she runs a bookstore. And she's just so shooken by all of the stuff that happened in Blight. Her boyfriend's trying to cheer her up. And she's like, yeah, I just kind of need to be alone for a while. Is that cool? And he's like, yeah, totally. Of course. I'll see you later. So he leaves, and she's just like, I, for some unknown reason, have deep, deep feelings of love for Phantom Stranger, even more so than my boyfriend. But, like, I don't even know the guy, so I don't know why that's happening. So we cut back over to middle of Metropolis, and apparently now the whole town is able to be possessed by ghosts. Like, that's happening in the center of town. But meanwhile, Superman is way out on the outskirts, and he's meeting back up with all the ghosts who says that he is to pay. And Superman's like, you're right, coming at me. Just do what you got to do. Possess me, beat me up, set me on fire. I deserve it. And the ghosts, including Dr. Light's like, yeah, awesome, let's do it. Let's beat him up. And as they go to, like, set him on fire, Phantom Stranger throws up a shield and just be like, hold on, Superman, seriously, you gotta listen to me. This is bonkers. These people they aren't ghosts. It's some sort of trick. They're going to possess your body, and then they will have the body of a Kryptonian. Like, You can't let them do that. And he's just like, no, you don't understand. That's definitely Dr. Light. And he's like, dude, I met Dr. Light. That ain't Dr. Light. He wouldn't care at all. He'd get it. And Superman basically picks Phantom Stranger up by the throat and says, nope, I have to burn for what I've done. And he tosses Phantom Stranger away. But before he does so, Phantom Stranger like reaches into his head, his spiritual shell, and says like, I can stop this by just basically like spiritually lobotomizing Superman. And that'll stop it. But he's like, nah, there's got to be a better way. So Superman throws him away. We see the ghost set him on fire, and he's freaking out. And Phantom Stranger's like, oh no, I've misjudged this horribly. And then all of a sudden, Superman just dispels the fire, and he just raises up miraculously. He looks over at Phantom Stranger being like, or I guess over at the ghost, and he's like, thank you, Dr. Light, or whatever you are. I never would have even known about that guilt in me if you didn't bring it to the surface, but I can make peace with it now. I am going to double down and keep fighting and fighting the good fight and whatnot. And all the ghosts are like, ah, crap. And they just immediately go back up through the crack in creation. So everything's saved, whatnot. The only one that's left is Dr. Light. And at that point, Superman grabs him, just being like, all right, bro, what are you? And Dr. Light's just like, wow, I didn't expect Superman to be so magically resistant. That's actually shocking here. And he starts slowly transforming, and his speech bubbles like slowly turn to that of the Sin Eater, which for anyone who's been around on this book for a while, it's the dude who Phantom Stranger took the life of at the beginning of this book, and he became this horrific monster that just is dead set on like destroying Phantom Stranger. So he's like, oh, Superman, we'll meet again. And he crumbles down this whole warehouse on them. Of course, both of them are fine. And Superman's like, did you know that guy? He's like, yeah, it's a whole thing. Don't worry about it. I'll deal with him. By the way, Stranger, I felt you reaching into my mind, but you didn't lobotomize me. Why not? And Stranger smiles and he says, I had faith in you, Superman. So Terrence 13 says, yeah, all right, all the ghosts are gone, everything's cool, but like the pattern is continuing around the world, which seems like this is part of like the first step in a much larger threat. So we're probably going to deal with that for an arc or so. And then Zoriel collapses to the ground and starts having like a seizure. Meanwhile, Cassandra Kraft is just sitting in her shop, like just sitting around, and then all of a sudden all of the books just start flying off the shelves, and she's freaking out like, what in the hell is happening? So yeah, that's the issue. I think it's a good issue to come back to after everything we had in Forever Evil Blight. It's not ignoring it, it's mentioning, yes, that all happened. We're post Forever Evil now, and we are just setting up the next things that are going to happen. We're reminding you of things that happened before Blight and anything that's necessary for new readers hopping on. I think this is a solid issue in terms of, all right, let's get back into the groove of things and acknowledging that we have new readers now as well. Beyond that, I mean, it's not like a whole lot happened. It's definitely a skippable issue for anybody who has been following this book. At the very least, you just need to know that Zoriel is not okay. Beyond that, I think I'm going to say this is a flat 7. It's a solid book, not my favorite. I do think some of the art on Superman's a little bit weak for me, but there are other panels that make it pop. So it's neither here nor there. It's just not fantastic the whole way through. So 7's where I'm at. Swamp Thing number 30, written by Charles Soule, art by Jesus Saiz. So last issue, Swamp Thing made a deal with the Serene to switch out his body to a human one temporarily, and then they double-crossed him and left him to die and burned his house and poisoned his body and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we pick up with the Serene in Germany. They just flew in Swamp Thing's body, and they are saying like, hey, take care of the package, everything's going to be cool. It's so worth our time, and we see that Swamp Thing is currently on ice. We then cut over to the tattoo parlor because Lady Weeds and Wolf kind of just left the reservation for a while to go explore New Orleans, and Lady Weeds really wanted some tattoos, so now she's covered in like flowers and vines all over her body, and she's like, oh, that feels so much better. I'm like back to myself again. And Wolf's like, super sexy. Anyway, let's go see what else we can do. But then Brother Jonah and Capucine popped up, and they were like, hey, Swamp Thing sent us to go get you because you just bailed, man. Like, what's that about? Anyway, you ready to head on back? likes tattoos, by the way. And she's like, I mean, we weren't really. And then the wolf pops in and just like, actually, yes, we're totally ready to go back. Come on, we're a family. Let's all go back to the reservation. So they get back. They see that the house was set on fire, and immediately they're like, whoa, what happened here? What happened to Swamp Thing? Maybe got pulled away on like official Avatar business. Also, it's a good thing the house didn't completely burn down, but I guess that's just because it's a humid swamp, so that makes sense. Lady Weeds calls out to Wolf and just being like, hey, yo, why are we pretending like we want to stay here? And he's like, I'm still waiting for a bunch of money and stuff to come in, so let's just play ball with them until we can like make an official escape. So they look around the estate for a while and they find the body that Alec Holland moved into, which I will call Alec at this point, despite the fact I'm sure he has some other name. He is poisoned, and Capucine immediately calls that out, being like, oh, he needs something, anything. What's going to get rid of we need like a stimulant. And so Brother Jonah go get some plants nearby and says, this will work if we just ground it up into a paste. So they feed it to him, and it's like, it's not working. What do we do? So Capucine just kicks him in the chest, and he wakes back up again. And when he sits up, he's just like, hey, oh, geez, what happened? And he's just like, we want to ask you that. What happened to the Avatar? Where is he? And he's like, it's me. I'm in the body. I'm here. And they're just like, no, you're not him. This is stupid. There's no way that's you. And he says, he gives some clear stuff. He's just like, I am Alec Holland. You're a Capucine. You're Brother Jonah. I know all this stuff because I am the Avatar. So can someone please tell me where my body is? And they reunite with Wolf and Lady Weeds. And everyone's basically just like, yeah, no, like, the Serene do this. This is part of their thing, but like they've never just disappeared with the body, and especially haven't tried to kill you and burn your house down before whenever we've done it. So yeah, this is weird. Something's going on. And then Brother Jonah points out the thing of like, also, we didn't tell you this before, but if you stay out of your body for more than like 2 or 3 days, you're just going to straight up die. And he's like, what? Days? Oh God. All right, well, what do we got? And Capucine says, hey, I know someone who knows a little bit about mystical stuff. He might be able to help. Enter Vandal Savage coming in via helicopter. He's like, oh my God, Capucine, it's been forever. How's it going? And they just got a whole buddy-buddy relationship here. And Capucine recognizes like, no, he's a monster. And he's like my best friend. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. I love sparring with her. So at that point, they say, do you know anything about where the Serene are? He says, yeah, no, I totally know where they are, but there will be a price. And he turns to Capucine and says, like, I want you physically now. And she's like, oh, you want here in front of everybody? That is what you want to do? And he's just like, yep, let's go. And immediately they just start fighting each other. Capucine throws a punch. They start sprawling and barring and all that sort of stuff. Until eventually Capucine gets the upper hand and takes down Vandal Savage. And she's like, there, I've bested you. You've had your fight. Let's go ahead and get some instructions. And he's just like, yep, fair enough. All right. So they're out in India. You can use my helicopter. I'll send directions to exactly where you need to land. And Alec calls out like, bro, we're taking your helicopter, how are you going to get back home? And he's like, oh, I'll walk. I'm immortal. I have all the time in the world. So we make our way to Bangalore, India, where Alec and Capucine specifically are. I think everyone else stayed home. But we're just like, yep, all right, this place has a whole bunch of plant stuff. We found this temple. Let's go check it out. And as they enter, there's a man inside who's like, oh my God, it's you. And he takes out a knife and just slices the arm of Alec, which does start bleeding. And Capucine says like, whoa, old man, what are you doing? He's like, nope, look. And apparently a whole bunch of plants start sprouting out of the wound. And he's like, I had to make sure I am the last of the Serene. I am the only one left. And I knew it was you right away. And he's just like, okay, great, cool. Where's my body at? And he's like, why would I know that? I have no idea where your body's at. He's like, you're part of the Serene. He's like, I'm all of the Serene. And he's like, okay, well, the Serene showed up at my door and took my body. He's like, that wasn't the Serene. I don't know who you gave your body to, but it wasn't me. So we cut back over to them. They're in a lab, and them being the fake Serene. And they are doing experiments on Alec Holland's body, like chopping pieces off and putting them through a blender. And the narration over top, it's not revealed as to who is talking, but the narration basically says, we can take pieces of his body and they essentially act as vegetable versions of stem cells. They can turn into any form of plant life whatsoever. They just need a bit controlling. So they take one of the spring sacraments, the like LSD fruit from the last issue that allows people to commune with the green, and they feed it to this test subject who is then able to use the green to control these stem cells to like make a full pineapple. And they're saying, so what we're going to do is we're going to mass produce the spring saccharints so that we can then mass produce other food, and we'll be able to make an infinite supply of food for us. However, the test subjects currently die after using the greens, so working out the kinks still. So we go back to the other Serene who is dealing with Alec, and he's just like, look, yeah, there's a time limit here. It's not like a hard and fast thing. We'll figure it out. I gotta go down to the old like stuff and try to research, see if there's anybody else who knew about the sacraments and all of our stuff, and see if we can't track down where your body is or how to keep you alive for a little bit longer. Meanwhile, here is a colleague of mine. Her name is Miki. She will show you around the town because, like, you wanted a vacation. You deserve a vacation. Don't worry about this stuff. We'll take care of it. So Miki is immediately making sex eyes at Alec and just like, hey, man, you want to go hit the town? So they head out to a restaurant, and Alec kind of trauma dumps. He's just like, I was okay with being the Avatar. I finally came to terms with the fact that this was permanent for me. And then, like, the very first second I had an out, I took it, and I feel like such an ass because of it. And he starts coughing up a mixture of blood and green stuff, and just like, all right, clearly I have less time than I thought. Let's go back and see what we got. So the Serene guy, they come up, and he's just like, yeah, nope, we're still looking. Capuchine's helping me out. And he's like, I'm a professional researcher. I can help too. Give me a book. Capuchine's like, can you read Sanskrit? Didn't think so. Go rest. You clearly need that more. So he heads to bed. And then there's a knock at the door. It's Miki. And Miki's like, hey, you want to do some stuff only humans can do? And so they start making out in bed. And we see Miki's tongue going into Alec's mouth. Alec has a tongue made of green. She's got a tongue made of something else. It's like mildly flesh colored. And immediately Alec's like, Jesus, what the hell was that? And we look at Miki, and she has these tendrils, these things coming out of her eyes, nose, and mouth. And Miki says, why, Alec, I'm just like you. Did you really think the Serene only gave their gifts to the green? So I think she might be like fungal. Maybe she's part of the rot, but like she's clearly not the Avatar, because that's Abigail. I don't know what's going on anymore, but I'm super into it. This is nice little pivot turn to be able to introduce some new concepts. So yeah, no, it's a interesting idea. I would say I like the art throughout this. I think I'm a little bit hesitant to say that I dislike the Wolf and Lady Weed stuff, but because it is the long game, it does feel kind of just wasted here. I'm sure when it eventually turns its head, it's going to make something like some big crazy thing that we didn't even expect. But as it stands now, it's just kind of taking up page space. And I don't know, I kind of would like to see Alex spending a bit more time being human. So hopefully we get a bit more of that in the next issue. But beyond that, I'd say this issue is a solid 8. It's a very good one. I am enjoying Charles Soule's run on this, and I look forward to seeing what more he has afterwards. And that's it. That's all the comics put out from DC Comics this April 2nd, 2014. And next week, oh my God, next week. Thank you, DC. I love you so much. Next week only has 8 comics coming out. Can you believe that? 8 comics. I don't think there's been 8 comics in any non-week 5 weeks since like ever. So thank you, because it really helps me plan my trip a little bit easier, knowing that you have that. But I'm going to also throw out a little screw you here, and I'll tell you why. Well, let me tell you the list of comics, and then it'll become apparent why. Next week, we have Superboy, Superman/Wonder Woman, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League 3000, World's Finest, Constantine, and Batgirl. None of those sound bad. All of them seem pretty reasonable, to be honest. And you're right, they are. But that's because I only said 7 of them. There's an 8th title, and that 8th title is Batman Eternal. Now, why is that a bad one for anyone who doesn't know? Well, I'll tell you why. DC, next week, is starting their weeklies. What's a weekly? Well, every single week, there's a new issue. So from now to a year from now, every week, I'm going to be talking about Batman Eternal. And that'd be fine if it were just one weekly, but it's not. By the end of the month, we're going to have a second weekly, which is Future's End. And then, in about 6 months' time, we're getting a third weekly, which is Earth 2 World's End. So all three of those are going to be running concurrently for about 6 months. And I'm going to lose my goddamn mind trying to keep all of that straight. So just letting you know that's going to happen. But for next week it's okay. It's just one. I can handle that. It's looking forward I dislike quite a bit. But hey, if you have any opinions on Batman Eternal or any of the comics I've talked about at all, I'd love to hear your input. Really. I feel like I'm shouting at a wall here and I need someone to talk to. Please, I'm begging you. Anyway, if you want to share your input, there are comments down below, or we're on multiple social media places such as Reddit and Discord and a Patreon, if you consider that to be social media. I don't, but I am contractually obligated to say that it is social media. But yeah, that's going to do it for me, and that's pretty much all I got. Tune in next week for literally 8 comics and probably an hour's worth of content, because I'm not going to try to stretch that out. I'm not. It's going to be a normal length episode for 8 comics, and you're going to like it. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week. Give this thing a thumbs up, thumbs down, 5 stars, 1 star. I don't care. It's a free country. Do whatever you want. But I will see you then, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.